How does someone fail at balance?
Oh, okay. I mean, I think that's simple. You lean too much to one side. Right?
Yeah.
So it's like if we're talking about this idea of navigating the challenging or suffering that's in the world, then you get consumed by that, right? And so that kind of goes back to something I mentioned in our like pre-talk where
Fail for you.
that might look like overwhelming sadness and anger. It's kind of debilitating, right?
Yeah.
And then the other side of that, I think this has become like talked about more and more over the last however many years, but that's that idea of like toxic positivity, right?
Hmm.
Where you don't look at the suffering. And so yeah, that's you would fail by basically kind of leaning into one aspect or one side more, and it kind of is more consuming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Balance is kind of, I think maybe failure also would entail a lack of awareness
Mhm.
into where you are in relationship to that spectrum.
Right.
Because you might not even know
Right.
where you
Mhm.
are. I mean, in yoga, it's easy, right? If
Mhm.
I'm not in balance, I'm feeling gravity.
Right.
But I'm like a
Yeah.
little scared.
Uh-huh.
I'm like moving feet and trying to get them under
Yeah.
me.
Which I bet we kind of simulate that in other ways, right? It's like because you said, I get scared. I move my feet to try to catch myself.
Right.
And I think that shows up in other ways too, right? There's fear that happens and we try to like get back to our balance, but we may not really know like what's the cause of this or
We might not
what's the
recognize it.
underlying emotion or what's the event that led to it. We may not have that awareness. But I think one other thing I want to say about that is I think it's just part of human nature in life that we are going to kind of, one day we're a little bit over here and we're feeling a little consumed by the sadness. One day we're over here and we're like just, joyful or whatever it may be. But I think it's this idea of like kind of pendulating to where we spend a little bit more time kind of in the center. And so just like when you're doing, as you mentioned, like a standing balance posture,
Hmm.
the goal isn't to be perfectly still. The goal is to have a little bit of like wobble, but find your sense of stability. Because if you're still, you're kind of missing out a little bit on strengthening, if we're using that example,
Yeah.
right? When there's a little bit of wobble, like sometimes I will intentionally create instability in whatever posture we're doing so that you can get, if we're talking about the physicality of it, you can get those muscles to like contract and then release because they're not able to fully hold it yet.
The
And
stabilizers.
then they're
Yeah.
strengthening through the process.
Yeah, we
Right.
laid down on our back on the rolled up blanket, and you had us doing like the
Oh yeah.
bicycle feet, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm like on this
Uh-huh.
teeter totter.
Uh-huh.
So that's a way in which you're inviting chaos while you're attempting to maintain balance.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And so I think life can be like that too, right?
Yeah,
It's like if we stay in your comfort zone, you're not really kind of like expanding your, if we're talking about capacity, you're not expanding your capacity to hold more, right?
right.
And so in a similar way, it's like you want a little bit of challenge or resistance, just like within the posture that we were talking about.
Yeah. I wonder if where in yoga we have gravity
Mhm.
being an indicator and like the muscles kind of doing that thing. I wonder in matters of the heart and of emotion if the nervous system is telling us things with regard to where we are in balance.
I think so, yes, but maybe sometimes we're not exactly in tune or aware, right? Or we
Yeah.
kind of have fallen into a pattern in our nervous system. I mean, I could go off on that, but yeah, that's the short answer.
Yeah. Well, it's
I know you have four more
it's
questions.
probably hard to okay, I'll move on in a second, but I got that. It's probably hard to hear that intuition and that nervous system in a world where we bombard and we
Right.
distract and we with food and with alcohol or drugs or with video games or
Mhm.
with scrolling, or it seems like we're
Yeah.
constantly saying, I'm not going to sit with
Mhm.
my nervous system and say, what's up in there, guy?
Right. I think there's that, and then the thing that I was kind of like about to get into is I think we also have things that have been modeled to, in various ways that we pick up on. So for instance, like in my family, it was kind of modeled that you just go, like go, 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 go,
Yeah.
right? And there's not a lot of time to sit and be present with things. And the I call it like over functioning, right? You over function because that's how you process, or not even process, but like that's how you manage things.
Survive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then that becomes like addictive to the nervous system, right? To
You've
go, go,
trained
go,
it
go,
what to
go.
expect. Yeah.
Right. And there's even a little bit of that, like kind of like adrenaline or stress response when you have a million things you got to do.
Yeah.
Right. And then when you actually slow down and start pay attention to the nervous system, it's interesting because when I first started doing that and I would slow down, my nervous system was like, oh my God, what am I forgetting?
Yeah.
What do I need to do?
Because you
Right.
needed to be in that state of stress in order to feel normal
Right.
or at a base level.
Right.
You're
Yeah.
almost training yourself to idle high.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so when you try to down idle, you're like, wait a second, this isn't the way the engine runs.
Right. And I think there's people that do the opposite, right? They're
Down
like
regulate.
low.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which
Goodness.
it shows up in yoga. It's really interesting because what I first was drawn to a practice that was like that, very intense,
Yeah.
and just move to the next posture. And probably what I needed was like restorative, right? Or yin.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. I see students that may primarily go to restorative or yin, and they actually might need something that's kind of what we would consider like up regulating,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.